Going here. Hey everybody, this is Pat Crane, aka Zug, along with Darius. Say hello, Darius.
Hi, I'm Darius.
There we go. And we are joined today by none other than lead encounter designer for World of Warcraft, Ian Hazzikostas. Ian, hello.
Hi, Pat. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Wonderful.
Good. All right, we'll just wait for that music. Actually, I'll just kill that music. That's fine.
Okay.
All those people.
All those people, yeah. So, all right, let's just jump right in. I know that we've got a limited time with you, so we need to get to it as far as patch 5.4 and maybe in the future, hopefully we'll get to some of that stuff as well. Let's start off with Siege of Orgrimmar. I just want to get kind of a basic overview as far as like when designing this. What are some of the cool mechanics that we're going to be seeing this time around? What were some of the goals that you had for this instance?
Also, okay, first off, some of the big picture goals, I think, were to wrap up the storyline that we've been building up to throughout the entire expansion, and to do it in a way that feels like it ties all the different elements of the expansion together. That's part of why, even though you end up in Orgrimmar, and underneath Orgrimmar in Garrosh's secret compound, we start in the Vale of Eternal Blossoms. We wanted the raid to feel like it was still part of Pandaria and connected to Pandaria, and not like, oh, after spending months doing stuff there, you're just going back to Kalimdor. So I think we did a pretty good job of tying that all together and telling a cohesive storyline, beginning with the destruction of the Vale due to Garrosh's actions, tracking him down, bringing the war to his doorstep, and then finally taking it right to him. As far as mechanics goes, I think, as always, we have, the usual wrinkles and interesting new mechanics that are showcased on bosses here and there. A couple that come to mind. Garrosh probably has my favorite take on mind control that we've seen in a while. It's a variant on mind control. It's a little bit, I think one of the encounter designers working on it calls it sharks and minnows. It's basically like mind control, except that instead of using your regular abilities and casting Fireball or Blizzard or whatever on your raid, you instead chase after your nearby allies and try to hit them. And if you hit them, they get mind controlled.
Wow.
If they get mind controlled, they chase after their nearby allies. So
that's awesome.
They can as you can imagine, the wipes that occur as a result of this can be pretty hilarious. We were seeing some of them on PTR yesterday. 2, 4, 8, 16, and then you lose.
Right.
So yeah, it's a lot of it adds a new dimension of really needing to, as you're killing your friends, to really control and lock them down as well.
Right. That's hilarious. I love that. Now, were there any other goals that you had as far as the design goes for this raid?
I think, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of making it feel like a conclusion to the Mists of Pandaria story arc, to really tie up and bring together a lot of loose ends. I think one of the things that we were really excited about is the number of bosses in the raid that are going to be in some form familiar to people, even if they're not necessarily, ardent followers of World of Warcraft lore. You'll recognize some of these folks from your daily quests, from major quest lines.
Sure.
I think most people are pretty familiar with, this guy, Lao Softfoot, that they rescued from a cage 95 times. Will you get to fight him?
Right.
The Paragons of the Klaxi. If you're a Horde, you've seen, Malkarok always lurking at Garrosh's side as one of his lieutenants through a lot of the 5-1 storylines and onward. You get to fight him, General Nazgrim, and so forth. So we didn't actually have to look very far to find worthy and interesting characters for players to fight through the entire raid.
Gotcha. Darius, you actually had a question about something.
To go off of that and the familiar characters, this is something I've been wondering about. What made you decide to make Gamin a more central character in Siege of Orgrimmar? Was it based on the treatment that Horde gave him, the horrible treatment that Horde players gave him, or was this some master plan all along?
Yeah, actually, we've been building up to this since 2004 when the pickpocket quest went in. No. So basically, I think when we're setting a raid in Orgrimmar, we obviously asked ourselves, what are the things that you would expect to see? What are the notable attributes of the city of Orgrimmar, the Valley of Strength, the drag into the Cleft of Shadow? Those are the 3 areas the players fight their way through until they get into Garrosh's underground base. And, well, in the Valley of Strength, yeah, Gamin is reasonably notable, so we're like, okay, what can we do with him? And it made for a fun achievement hook. He is, I know, he has some awesome lines. He is actually not a central plot figure, but there's a fun achievement associated with him. Similarly, we worked in everyone's favorite trash mob from Throne of Thunder as part of a Thok the Bloodthirsty achievement. There's a gastropod in a cage that you can do some things with.
No, more gastropods, huh?
Exactly.
Oh boy. Maybe let's move on to flex rating for a little bit, because
Sure.
I mean last time we talked for the show was like a week before you announced flex raids. So first of all, is there anything else you would like to announce on this show? I just want to get this out of the way. Anything you want to announce for 5.4 or beyond before we get going, so that a week later I'm not totally surprised?
No, I think you pretty much got it covered.
Oh, okay, all right. So flex raids.
Yes.
Some people have suggested that Blizzard will either replace LFR or normals with flexible raids. Now, has this ever been in the plan? Is this part of the plan? I just kind of want to get this kind of out there.
We will not replace LFR with flexible raids. They are very different structures and serve very different groups and offer very different types of gameplay.
Sure.
I think flexible raids are really attractive to the friends and family groups that may have struggled a little bit with some of our normal mode content the last couple of tiers. They're also attractive to pickup groups that, again, may form in trade chat, give people a chance to organically meet new people and get in there and have a social raiding experience and work through content that's a little bit more accessible for a pickup group. LFR is something for people who really just want the convenience of being able to access and see the content without necessarily having a large circle of friends or waiting in trade chat and finding a pug. If you want to log on your lunch break and sit down for an hour and do an LFR wing, and you can see Lei Shen, you can see some of these major figures, get some loot for your character, that's not something Flexible Raid really is ever going to be able to fill as a niche. Now, in terms of going in the other direction, maybe. It's not something we have any specific plans for, but depending on the flexible structure and how it works out and how it's embraced by players and the lessons we learn from it, we know there are going to be lessons that we learn. I think that's part of the excitement associated with the feature for us.
Mm-hmm.
There will be improvements that we can make based on how this plays out. It's potentially something that could be applied to normal mode difficulty as well. I don't think it's a great fit for heroic under any circumstances, just because while we have some leeway and we can roughly balance the raids to be roughly comparable in difficulty depending on raid size, and
Sure.
It feels pretty similar if you have 13 or 17. When we're getting into Razor's Edge tuning for heroic purposes and people who are really going to min-max, we don't think we actually can balance it to the point that you're not going to find yourself wanting to drop 2 or 3 people to do a specific fight or add 4 people to do
Right.
a different fight. And that's not something that anyone wants to get into, I don't think.
Well, and it seems to me kind of be like, okay, how do you make heroics casual?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's the heroic guilds, they're okay with the logistics of managing a fixed 10-player, 25-player roster, dealing with recruitment and the ebb and flow of leaving and returning members and all of that. And they have structures in place to do that. So that's something they can handle.
Gotcha. Also, let's talk a little bit about composition for Flex.
Sure.
What are we? Is there like a magic ratio for healers? I'm assuming it's going to be 2 tanks.
Yes, everything is 2 tanks, since our 10-player through 25-player content generally assumes 2 tanks. There aren't specific ratios that are enforced or expected. In general, there's a lot of leeway with the tuning, and much as a lot of people will 2-heal or 3-heal 10-player fights, that's actually a 50% difference in the amount of healing you have available to you, and it works. If you have a 16-player flex group, you can probably manage with 3 healers, 4 healers, or 5 healers. If you have 2 healers, you're probably going to have a hard time, but
Okay.
I think that's something the players can understand and realize organically. We let you scale your group size, but yes, if you just take 2 tanks and 2 healers and keep adding DPS arbitrarily, at some point when you have 2 healers trying to keep 21 other people alive, they're going to be overtaxed. And
A little bit, probably.
yeah, just a bit.
Cool. Darius, you have a question?
Not related to flex rating. I have some questions related to loot if you want to move on to that.
Sure.
So with loot in 5.4, biggest question I have is why no Valor gear in 5.4?
It's an interesting question. So Valor gear, for just sort of to look back a little bit in history, originally Valor gear was emblem gear or badge gear in Burning Crusade, and it served the function of complementing normal mode raiding and filling in for bad luck. You could say, oh, if I didn't get any drops this week or the week after, at least I got these badges of justice or emblems of frost or whatever that I can go spend on an equivalent piece of gear that at least I feel like I got something out of my time. And Valor gear still continues to serve that purpose and has continued to serve that purpose for normal mode raiders. And that's fine. But actually, for looking for raid and the new flex audience, it has the opposite effect of replacing the gear that is dropped. An LFR player, every Valor item that they get is one less item that they actually need or want out of the raid. And when you're looking at your quote-unquote best in slot list as an LFR player, it's actually comprised 70% of things that you're going to buy off a vendor, which is a less exciting place for loot to be than killing a dragon and, grabbing something off its smoldering corpse. Because that's what raiding is about, damn it. You kill dragons and get loot from them.
Exactly.
And so Valor, however, for upgrades, actually accentuates the importance of loot instead of diminishing it. The more value you get for upgrades makes you want to kill more bosses to get loot off their corpses so that you can then upgrade it instead of wanting less loot from them. And so it keeps Valor feeling interesting and relevant, but allows our other item structures to actually shine and thrive so that you can go to Timeless Isle and do the progression there. You can do LFR, flex, normal mode rating, and so forth.
Well, and is that the same idea behind putting certain items like the heirloom weapons and the shaman transmog gear, and I'm sure that there's probably going to be other stuff that you're not putting into LFR and you're just putting into flex, normal, and heroic?
Yes, I mean, I think some of that is just offering incentives. There are different things that you get, and you get access to the sort of the higher tier you go.
Mm-hmm.
Item level is the one constant, and obviously the harder difficulty you attempt, the higher item level you'll get. But, we've always said, hey, you can only get this title or this achievement or whatever from a certain tier of difficulty. And we do hope, and the people who want to get these heirloom weapons that will help them level on into the future, that we hope that those people will seek out groups that are forming and pick up groups to do Garrosh over the months to come as patch 5.4 unfolds.
Sure. Well, and I know that there are a lot of people that are kind of upset. I mean, the more casual folks that maybe only can do LFR. And so, I mean, what was the thought process behind, I guess how to incentivize it while not, totally telling LFR people to go suck it. You're done.
I mean, I think the difference between incentivizing and so we want to draw people and attract people to new modes, to higher levels of difficulty. And we have done that by adding new things rather than taking away things.
Sure.
We haven't taken something that LFR players were accustomed to getting regularly and said, oh, you can't get this from LFR anymore. Sorry. Like, oh, you want your set pieces? No. Sorry, can't happen. We've said, hey, we have this new thing that we've never done before in a raid, but if you want to get it, you have to do a higher tier. And it's honestly, it's not indispensable, right? This isn't an item that is essential to the furtherance and continued enjoyment of your character.
Right.
People who don't manage to kill Garrosh in flexible mode and don't get their heirloom weapon from him will still level just fine in the future, and that will all work out.
Gotcha. Theories?
Okay, so moving on to some questions about Proving Grounds. One of the things that I was wondering is this planned to be a testing ground for possibly new mechanics, or just a kind of a fun way to practice roles or to get people interested in playing something different that they've never played before?
Potentially. I think the core of the idea for Proving Grounds was that we don't do a very good job of letting players practice their skills when it comes to the things you need to do in group content in a safe environment, in a way that doesn't come in a pressure-filled environment or maybe at the expense of other players. If I've leveled in our game as a damage dealer, because most people do, that's how you complete quests, you kill mobs, turn in rewards, and so forth, and I decide, I want to try tanking. I've never tanked before, but I want to try it. Well, the only way for me to really try that is, well, I spec tank and I push that Q button, and I feel bad for the other 4 people who are going to be, the reality, I'm going to learn at their expense.
Right.
And that's the only way, that is the only way to learn how to tank in our game. And we're changing that.
Right.
This way, with Proving Grounds, you can practice it. You get your bronze, get your silver if you want, maybe. And at that point, you actually probably have a pretty good handle for all your buttons, for picking up mobs that are coming in, keeping them off the healer that's keeping you alive. And I would feel perfectly comfortable going into a dungeon with a tank who has never tanked a dungeon before, but has done the first couple of rounds of Proving Grounds. And I think that helps. It gives players a chance to get comfortable with a playstyle they haven't previously experienced. And that's, I think, one of the most valuable threshold contributions. It's certainly a system we could expand in the future and have more specialized tests or ways of introducing other concepts. But that big thing that I mentioned is kind of what we're most excited about right out the gates.
Right on. And I know that you guys are having some, or you found a glitch or something like that in Proving Grounds on the PTR. And now with all of that stuff kind of fixed up, do you feel like support classes especially can manage Proving Grounds fairly well? It's fairly forgiving, at least in the beginning, and maybe if you go on endless mode, by the time you get to the end of it, you're pretty much spent, right?
Pretty much. I think it's a little bit like challenge modes in terms of the tuning. Everyone can get gold. There isn't a spec in the game of the appropriate role that can't get gold in Proving Grounds.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when it comes to how many can you make it to wave 42 or wave 57 of endless if you are playing optimally, there's going to be some variation there from spec to spec, similarly to how if you're literally trying to get the world #1 time in a challenge mode instance, there are probably going to be some compositions that are better than others, but every reasonable composition can get gold. And that's kind of really what we formally structure and reward around. If people want to push themselves for bragging rights, that's fine. And I expect that if you want to compare apples to apples, you'll look at, how you did as a Frost Death Knight, getting to Endless Wave, whatever, compared to other Frost Death Knights, not necessarily mages or warlocks or hunters, who are just dealing with different issues and have different strengths and weaknesses.
Right. Darius, other question?
Another question for Proving Grounds. Do you guys see this having any impact at all on raiders or raid, high-end raid teams possibly using this for tryouts or whatever? Or was this, again, just designed for individual and their personal progression?
I mean, I'd love to see a world where people forming pickup groups don't demand that you have the achievement for killing the boss that they're trying to kill in the pug, because that's kind of one of those, like, how do I get a job without experience? How do I get experience without a job kind of deals?
Exactly.
If instead someone can say, hey, look, I have silver, I have gold DPS Proving Grounds, I'm a competent player, take me. And if that actually begins to carry some weight and credibility, that would be a wonderful thing for us to see.
Cool.
But there's no way currently for anyone or any plans for anyone to be able to spectate in on that?
Spectate, no. And I think, honestly, that's a little bit of what goes into it being a safe environment. I know people, good players included, who don't do Brawlers Guild, even though it's the type of content that they would objectively enjoy if it were a single-player game, just because they don't want to have a dozen people watching them screw up. And there is some value to creating an environment where you can play as badly as you want, no one will notice and make fun of you, and you can learn and practice and really hone your abilities and raise your overall skill level.
Cool. A couple of quick questions for you. Actually, one's a quick question. The other one, maybe not so much. Now, first of all, are there any encounters that you and your team are working on for Mists of Pandaria still, or are you strictly building for the next expansion now?
It's really a balance. I mean, we're definitely looking ahead to the next expansion, but we're actively doing our PTR testing, and we are still, tweaking and polishing and.
But are you planning
every aspect of Siege of Orgrimmar?
Are you planning on any more encounters after Siege? And
we don't,
not necessarily raiding content, but
I think there will probably be some content that serves as a bridge, but I wouldn't expect a new raid tier or anything like that.
Sure. Now, the other thing was that I think it was Ghostcrawler that tweeted something about wanting to have more encounters that didn't rely on the trinity of tank, DPS, and heals, and just wondering if that was one of the directions you plan on continuing further as we go into the future of World of Warcraft.
I think it's something that's been very successful in scenarios. There's certainly a lot of flexibility in not needing specific role compositions to just queue up and jump in to see some content. There's also a different type of gameplay involved that gives you a reason to use some of your utility abilities to snare, to crowd control, things like that, versus something that's just stuck on a tank and the range stands back and nukes it. But I don't think that's something we're looking to do sort of very broadly. I think there's still very much a core place for the tank healer DPS gameplay. inner dungeons and raids. And there are plenty of people who enjoy tanking, plenty of people who enjoy healing, and there's a certain interdependency there that is nice for just the MMO gameplay and the cooperation involved.
Cool. Hopefully we have time for this. Darius, you have one more question?
Yeah, this is less 5.4 and just more overall, but what do you find is harder for you and for your team? Coming up with new ideas for mechanics or scratching ones that you guys thought were amazing but just aren't working out?
That's a very good question. Probably the latter. It's something that we definitely have done and continue to do. It's one of the valuable parts of PTR testing and our internal testing. A lot of mechanics, it's pretty rare. We will occasionally scrap a mechanic after something gets out on PTR, just based on seeing how that played out. More commonly, we'll have the fight fully designed internally, and then we'll go to test it with our internal groups, and we'll realize it just doesn't work the way we thought it was going to. It either is degenerate or just plain annoying from a player perspective, and we'll go in a different direction. But obviously, we have people are always invested in their ideas and have this vision of how cool it could be. And there are times where we'll like tweak something and try to fix it, then realize it was just fundamentally flawed and scrap it.
Right. All right, I think that has to be the last question. Thank you so much, Ian, for joining us yet again.
It's a pleasure as always.
Give you the big applause, and thank you. And hopefully we'll be able to get to talking to you maybe before BlizzCon. I don't know. We'll see. But good luck with all the Siege of Orgrimmar, the final testing, and as we get into it, I'm looking forward to it, man. I really am.
Thank you very much. Me too.
I'll talk to you later.
Later.